Hello guys, we are going into a winter tonight as cold as can be, freezing not only the rivers but your eyelashes as well. You step out of your door and your breath is immediately transformed into ice crystals that burn your face. The morning is a blue mist, and the air is as hard as stone, so still that it seems to push against your ears. You pull your cloak tighter, but it's like wrapping yourself in paper against the wind's teeth. There is snow banked up against the thatch of your roof, so thick you half fear it will collapse, and the way to the well is only a white haze. You most likely won't make it through this, but let's imagine you do. So, don't get cozy yet, give the video a like and subscribe if you actually like what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, give me your location and your local time. Now, turn the lights off, and we'll venture together into the cold realm of the Middle Ages' worst winters. You trudge through the drifts, every step a crunch that echoes as if the whole world is hollow glass. This isn't a modern storm that lasts a few inconvenient days. This is a season that sinks its claws in and doesn't let go, stretching for months where food dwindles, wood piles shrink, and life feels like a coin flip between survival and silence. Historical accounts inform us that in times such as 1315, when the Great Famine started, rain and cold ruined harvests throughout Europe. Grain rotted in the field, and the cold meant that nothing could be salvaged. Entire villages gazed at vacant barns, while snow continued to fall from gray skies. But famine isn't just what bites you, it's the little cruelties. Your fingertips go red, then numb, then waxy pale. Humans wrap them up in fabric and whisper spells, because it doesn't have a neat medical name here. A peculiar aspect from monastic reports. Some families filled their boots with warm pigeon feathers, as they thought that birds had an unseen ember of life that prevented the freezing off of toes. It is half superstition, half ingenuity, and you hold on to both of them. The stillness of a cold morning is misleading as well. Listen intently, and you'll hear the snap of branches splitting with ice, or the creak of far-off timbers as roofs buckle. Dogs whine at nothing, disturbed by the unfamiliarity of sound traveling differently in this air. Even voices sound muffled, as if words are arrested and frozen before they can reach anyone's ears. You catch yourself muttering without realizing why, as if the cold itself would break apart if you talk too loudly. Historians are still arguing about whether these vicious winters were one-off catastrophes, or the beginnings of a larger climate trend that started what we now term the Little Ice Age. Some say it was volcanic eruptions shading the sun, some attribute them to changes in the ocean currents. At the time though, no one thinks of science. People simply assume heaven is angry, or perhaps demons are having their fun. For you, trudging through drifts, it doesn't matter which is true. All that matters is surviving to see green again. Even inside the hut, safety isn't guaranteed. Smoke clings to the rafters as families gather around a fire that makes their knees barely warm while their backs are cold as stone. The damp wool, dirty bodies, and moldy straw reek of years past hangs in the air and combines with the acrid smell of wood smoke so intense it burns your eyes. You stay awake at night and listen to the wind tear at the shutters, half expecting them to shatter. And when you finally fall asleep, you dream of heat only to wake with ice on your blanket. And yet, in spite of everything, life prevails. Chickens scrape weakly at the corners, children play tag with little wisps of steam for smiles, and you still make your way to church, bells ringing softly in the frozen air. There is toughness here contained in the smallest gestures. They repair boots with shreds of leather, blend flour with powdered acorns in a time of grain loss, and offer thin soup to neighbors since hunger is more bearable in a group than by oneself. Consider it. This is merely the first break of dawn in many. And yet, you place one foot in front of the other, crunching through white silence, because hope, even hope for the faintest promise of spring, is sufficient to make you move. You crouch down, staring under the low roof beam of a peasant hut, the doorway rimed with frost where breath has condensed over weeks. The first thing that strikes you is the odor, smoke so heavy it irritates the back of your throat, a damp odor of straw and wet wool, and under that the faint ammonia bite of cattle penned up at one end. In the dead of winter, folks house their animals, not out of charity but need. The heat from their bodies is the closest thing to central heating you'll get in the 13th century. Imagine drifting off to sleep with a cow breathing heavily a few feet away, its ribs showing from lack of fodder, its breath clouding in the same icy air you're trying to escape. The hut is dark even in daytime. There is a single small window, really a hole in the wall rather than a pane of glass, that admits a faint smear of light, but it is covered with oiled cloth or with horn to exclude drafts. You sit on a bench beside the hearth, but the fire is no raging one. Wood is precious at the height of winter. Every bough has already been collected, every hedge stripped. What you have now is soggy brushwood or peat that smolders rather than flames. The smoke coils round the rafters, falling in black soot, and you rub your eyes until they sting. This is heat, medieval fashion, just enough to unfreeze your fingertips, not nearly enough to make you remember that the world outside is colder than you can endure. Archaeological excavations in northern Europe have demonstrated just how small these huts were, occasionally no larger than a contemporary living room, and housing an entire family with their livestock. One of the facts from mainstream history that one should keep in mind is that most medieval peasants resided in one-room houses until late in the later Middle Ages. No privacy, no insulation aside from wattle and daub walls and thatch roofs. If the wind blew from the wrong way, snow could seep in through the roof itself, covering your bedding. But it wasn't just a question of building, it was one of making do. Families filled gaps in walls with straw, covered sleeping mats with bracken, and covered themselves with every scrap of fabric they could find. A doughty detail that is gleaned from some village records. Some households spread manure against the outer walls as an insulating layer. It sounds revolting to modern ears, but packed frozen dung formed a surprisingly effective barrier against the biting winds. You picture yourself smoothing muck along the hut wall with numb hands, gagging at the smell, but grateful for the difference it makes. You sit cross-legged by the hearth, sipping from a clay cup of thin broth. It has the flavor of cabbage and water, perhaps with barley thickened in it if you're fortunate. The broth burns your lips, but you're grateful it's the only time today you'll have warmth spread inside you. Out in the snow, everything is muffled, but you hear the chopping in the distance. Someone hacked up a tree branch, the sound carrying strangely in the cold air. Each whack is survival in terms of seconds of flame. Despite all this, would supplies run out? There was a point when families would burn dung patties, dried for months, in order to retain the embers. The odor is unforgettable, pungent, bitter, that fills every nook of the hut until it permeates your clothes. You almost taste it when you lick your lips, but you hold on to the fire like it is a living being. Without it, you would not survive long. You gaze around the hut, taking in the people. A grandmother bends her hands around her knees, fingers thick with chilblains, muttering prayers against the cold. Children huddle under sheepskins, not uttering a word, saving their strength. The cheeks are hollow, the eyes too wide for their faces. Each cough tightens the room because sickness travels more quickly when bodies are impoverished by hunger. You sense the burden of quiet, all of you holding your breath for spring, all of you waiting to know if you will ever witness it. And yet there are flashes of odd comfort. Someone pulls out a piece of dried apple from fall caches. The sweetness explodes on your tongue like a summer memory, quick and stinging in its reminder of heat. For a moment or two you smile. It's in these brief tastes and moments of fleeting happiness that existence is pieced together. Historians continue to debate whether medieval winters were more severe than those of ancient times or merely perceived as such because of the circumstances of society. Some climatologists hypothesize that the Little Ice Age commenced slowly in the latter Middle Ages, inclining weather to colder, more watery seasons. Others attribute the suffering as much to weaker agricultural systems buckling under duress. To you, huddled in a hazy hut with your belly rumbling, the source is beside the point. Cold is cold and the terror is genuine. Imagine yourself reclining to sleep. Your bed is a heap of straw topped by a coarse blanket. It crackles under you and tiny pieces catch in your hair. You wrap your cloak round your body, but the cold at your back is unrelenting. You pull your feet into a straw sack to prevent them from freezing, and you huddle up, nose buried in your hands. Sleep does not come when the wind shakes the door and the smoke burns your eyes, but eventually weariness catches up with you. You dream of fields in summer, of hot bread, of rivers that do not moan with ice. Then comes morning, gray and unforgiving. You wake to frost on your blanket, to your breath fogging in front of you. Someone furs the embers, tempting them to flame, and the day is reborn. The cadence is unending. Stock the fire, conserve food, care for animals, pray for heat, and meanwhile the hut huddles beneath its snowy ceiling like a fatigued animal, containing you within its delicate ribs. In spite of all this, these huts were cocoons of survival, not prisons of misery. Inside them, families sang, recited stories, and celebrated feast days even when the pantries were empty. The fire's crackle served as background music to human determination. You know that walls are thin but that inside them the bonds are thick with need. In a sense you are warm because you are together even if the thermometer says otherwise. And outside? The snow settles heavily upon the thatch, groaning as it does so, and smoke winds out of the chimney into a sky pale as if drained of color. A crow is cawing somewhere in the distance, a harsh note in the muffled stillness. You move back out into it, wrapping your cloak close, your own body already sighing for the hut's thin warmth. But you bring with you the aroma of smoke and dung, the taste of cabbage broth, the noise of the soft breathing of a child in the night. This is the center of medieval winter, a small room, a small fire, and a hard determination not to let the cold get the better of you. You stumble through a route that no longer resembles a route, just churned up snow from dozens of feet ahead of you. Your belly aches, not with illness but with hunger that gnaws deeper than the cold. The famine winters were unforgiving. Consider the early 14th century, for instance the Great Famine starting in 1315 when persistent rains, waterlogged fields and cold destroyed crops for 3 bitter years. Grain withered, hay decayed, and cattle emaciated in sodden pastures. Folks in villages throughout Europe didn't simply live in fear of hunger, they had it every hour of every day, a constant throb that tinged anything else with gray. You looked down at your hand holding a crust of bread so hard it might shatter a tooth. This could be your whole day's food. Bread had always been the staff of life. But now, with crops destroyed, even the most meager loaves were padded with ground acorns or pea flour. They filled the belly but little else. You chew slowly, trying to deceive yourself into fullness. Others around you chew just as hungrily, eyes empty, cheekbones drawn in. You understand that many won't witness the thaw. The famine winters starved not individuals but communities. Villages that were once filled with laughter and rumors went quiet. Fields lay empty, tilled earth wasted as black muck under ice. Markets collapsed because there was nothing to sell. Picture strolling through a town square that was once bustling with bread markets and butcher shops, now only closed-up stalls and poverty-stricken beggars. Hunger became the hum of life. One interesting historical fact is that famine winters in the years 1315 and 1317 killed between 10 and 15% of the people in regions of northern Europe. That's not only a figure that's almost 1 out of every 10 individuals you see on this highway just gone by spring. Consider your neighbors, your relatives, the old lady who used to sing while milking her cow. Chances are, some will never get to hear birdsong again. A peculiar fact shows up in a few histories. When bread really did run out, folks made famine ale from whatever could be improvised nettles, oats, even tree bark. Flavor must have been awful, a bitter drink more like medicine than ale, but starving throats downed it eagerly. You can almost smell it, sour and earthy, like the forest itself boiled and strained into a mug. As hunger worsened, options became bleaker. You hear rumors in the village of pilfering grain from monasteries, plundering storehouses defended by armed men. Others grumble about consuming the seed grain, destined for planting in the spring, knowing it will mean starvation will roll into the following year. Some accounts, stern ones, speak of cannibalism in the most devastated regions. Whether truth or not, that they circulated at all indicates how thin the survival line became. And then there are moments of generosity too. Families splitting a crust, neighbors dropping a turnip on another's doorstep, monks turning out to offer thin porridge for a few mouths from their doorways. Humanity glowed faintly but tenaciously even in famine. You struggle on down the snowy trail, listening to your belly rumble, wondering how long a body can keep going this way. Children whimper in the dark with that high, wailing cry of hunger no rocking can ease. Mothers comfort them, holding them close, praying warmth will numb the pain. Men become thin, cheeks etched into points, hands shaking in weakness when they swing an axe. Daily life turns into a round of rationing and prayer. Historians still debate whether the Great Famine was solely brought about by weather changes or aggravated by political mismanagement. Heavy taxation and constant wars drained peasants of reserves they would have survived on, argue some. Others claim it was nature itself, a one-in-a-century string of bad weather that pushed the scales in the wrong direction. You, plodding through snow with a chip of bark bread in your mouth, don't have the leisure of argument. All you know is the sky has not cleared in weeks and fields resemble graveyards. You crowd among others in the smoky longhouse of the village. Someone scoops out a watery stew of parsnips and turnips, roots puckered and stringy from improper storage. You spoon it into your mouth anyway because it is warm and fills the cavity inside for a little while. The room reeks of boiled soil, sweat and desperation, but also something perverse, people still coming, still speaking, still clinging to living. A song wells up, stopping first, then louder, voices blending together as though harmony itself might nourish the soul. Night comes rapidly in famine winters, with bellies half empty, bodies lean, the cold seeps in more rapidly. Families crawl onto straw beds, drawing ragged blankets tight. The hunger won't permit you to sleep soundly. You wake frequently, mouth dry, stomach cramped. In dreams you stand before tables spread with roast meat and bread loaves golden with butter, to wake up and find your hand clasped on nothing. And yet, even here, survival mechanisms adapt. Some of the peasants forage for edible weeds beneath the snow, discovering which roots will not kill them. Others dry nettle leaves, grind them and add them to flour. Some go hunting for squirrels or birds, anything that will find its way into the pot. There is ingenuity and desperation, but it never seems adequate. In the morning, frost sparkles on each thatched roof, lovely if you are able to remember for a moment how lethal it is. Children scrape ice from pails, their fingers red and raw. Men hobble into the woods, hoping to drive a hare out of its burrow. Women stretch dough as thin as vellum to stretch it out. Each movement is survival against a background of white nothingness. And you, your belly sore, your breath a whisper in the air, wonder how many more mornings like this are going to pass before spring lifts the famine's hold. You know not everybody will make it. But you keep walking now, taking another bite of hard bread, chewing deliberately because there is no other option. You shuffle towards the fire, holding your hands against your chest, and look down at your feet. They become the color of old candle wax, speckled with spots of red rage. The hurt is stabbing, then strangely not there, as if someone has pilfered away the nerve endings. Frostbite, though you don't know that word. You only know the look of neighbors losing toes, the hushed rumors of fingers turning black until they drop off. You grab at pieces of rag, twisting them awkwardly, attempting to conserve some warmth against flesh that's as cold as stone. A neighbor bends over, offering advice that sounds like incantation and not medicine. Garlic poultices, he advises, applied to the flesh. Another swears by rubbing with goose fat, saying the animal's heat remains in the oil. Another binds charms, small pieces of cloth and bone to wrists and ankles to ward off frost demons gnawing at the flesh. These are not physicians, of course. Learned men write in Latin far away from here, in monasteries and schools. But what is the use of theory when you are seeing your toes turn black in a hut where the fire goes out every evening? There is one mainstream fact that has survived from what was written. Frostbite was the norm in medieval Europe on bad winters, and amputations, though primitive, were not unheard of. Without antiseptics, even small wounds would suppur. Yet incredibly, many people survived on, maimed but alive, limping across fields come spring. Resilience was not a choice, it was the only choice. You unwrap your cloths to have another look. The appearance makes you grimace, but you continue. The air is filled with damp straw and smoke, but beneath it there's the sour, metallic taste of infection. You've watched men lose limbs not from the cold itself but from the rot that followed. Families sharpen knives not only for meat but for unseen emergencies no one dared speak of. And then, too, there are the remedies so bizarre they almost bring a laugh if laughter didn't rattle your ribs in the cold. One odd story set down in a healer's journal speaks of people jamming chopped onions into frostbitten wounds, hoping the strong bite would chase out the cold demons. Another swears by warm urine baths for hands and feet. Warmth is warmth no matter how tacky. Picture the odor, the vapor, the grim determination of someone who will experiment rather than have their fingers fall off. Sitting by the fire you can hear coughing. Cold doesn't just numb skin, cold weakens lungs, drains strength. A boy huddles in the corner, a rattle in his chest. You know it for what it is, illness spreading in bodies already thinned by starvation. Chilblains, frostbite, coughs, fevers they arrive as a package deal like nasty friends. You move uncomfortably, tucking your cloak closer as if fabric could keep you safe. Historians to this day argue whether or not these diseases conditioned medieval medicine's dependence on superstition or if superstition merely filled the gap from too little knowledge. Others say the desperate attempts of commoners such as filling wounds with herbs created the foundations of herbal medicine. Others say those attempts were not much more than prayer, with luck sometimes masquerading as healing. To you, on a bench with rags wrapped around your feet, it's irrelevant. You'll attempt anything that holds out even a sliver of promise of relief. You picture waiting out there again, toes aching, gasp coming short in your chest. The snow crunches underfoot, but it sounds muffled as if the world itself were half asleep. Your limbs feel weighted, sluggish, but you push on. If you don't keep moving, you know you'll stiffen like the travelers discovered by the roadside, curled up as if they slept, but locked into permanence by the sunrise. In huts, the cures come in multiplicity. They hang iron charms over doors, saying the metal nips the frost in the bud. They sprinkle salt around corners, tracing protective circles. Children are made to sleep with dogs for warmth, fur against bare skin, human and animal alike, relying on each other. And yet, for all the peculiarity, the traditions stitch together a net of comfort. You start thinking that perhaps onion packs or garlic poultices work, if only because hope itself heats the heart. But you cannot dismiss the proof of your own flesh. Your fingertips sting with the pins and needles pain of unthawing, then fade to nothing. You understand in your gut that numbness is no blessing, but the precursor to loss. The mind sneaks in, what if you can't walk in spring, can't work the fields? Survival is already on the blade's edge. To be debilitated by cold could push you off it altogether. But life goes on. You limp through tasks, feeding animals, chopping ice in buckets, hauling wood. Every movement aches, but every movement sustains you. The cabin resonates with mundane sounds, the rub of a knife, the hiss of boiling water, the muted hum of prayer. Amid the pain, life somehow will not be done. Occasionally, in brief moments, you see something nearly beautiful. Frost designs are worked on the window cloth, delicate as lace patterns. Icicles suspended from eaves like crystal stilettos catch what little light there is. Snowflakes fall in lazy spirals, falling upon cloaks and eyelashes to be quickly gone. For an instant, the world is not cruel, only strangely quiet. Then your toes ache once more, pulling you back into the pain of the real. Night comes and you go to bed. The rags on your feet remain wrapped close, shoved into straw sacking for warmth. You lie awake, gazing up at the black rafters, hearing the wind rattle. Off in the distance, wolves howl, and though farther away than you'd prefer, it's still too close. You pull the blanket over your head, hoping hiding from the noise will keep it at bay. In the darkness, your toes throb, burn, then die away. You pray a prayer you're not sure anyone is listening to. When dawn breaks, pale and gray, you re-examine your feet, their worst skin blistered, darkening. You exhale, shoulders slumping, but rise anyway. Work doesn't wait. Life doesn't wait for harm. You stumble towards the door, boots full of straw, rags wrapped tightly, heart heavier than your frame. You emerge into the snow once more and the routine continues. Survival is no longer about comfort, it's about refusal. And as you limp along the track, something occurs to you. Pain is your friend. Reminds you that you're alive, still walking, still able to see one more day. In a winter so bitter, that's perhaps the nearest to hope. You are standing on the riverbank, looking at something that should not be in nature. The water, normally swift and dark and turbulent, is frozen fast under an ice crust so solid you could drive an ox cart across it. Where fishermen used to drop nets, where salt barges, wine barges and grain barges, there is nothing but coldness and stillness. This is not the frolicking glaze on a pond in December. This is a deep freeze that constricts trade, famines markets, and freezes entire areas into immobility. The river was the highway, the lifeline. In medieval Europe, rivers counted for more than most highways, which in winter were mud, ruts, or snowed up. But now the river is a tomb of trade. You can see ships stuck, hulls tilting at strange angles, their crews long vanished. The ice groans weakly beneath its own mass as bones might move. The air is slightly metallic smelling, keen as if the river itself has been made of steel. You are not alone. There are a few merchants around you, stomping their feet, cloaks pulled tight, gazing with empty eyes at what was once their way of life. Bales of cloth bound for the next town, barrels of salt fish from the coast, wheels of cheese all stuck upriver or jammed behind frozen locks. Tickets based on regular flow now fall in weeks. Inns are empty. The streets are quiet. A motionless world is a hungry world, a world with no trade, no news. One mainstream fact compiled from medieval chronicles. With the colder phases of the Little Ice Age, great rivers such as the Seine, the Thames, and even along the Baltic coast had frozen over for weeks at a time. It was not only a nuisance, it was an economic catastrophe. Imagine London isolated from deliveries, Paris without flour, Baltic towns without salt to preserve fish. The ice became an imperceptible barrier throttling life itself. And still, humans are nothing if not obstinate. Traders invented ruses to pull sledges across the ice, hauling merchandise by sheer muscle power where water formerly swept it along with ease. Others waited for snow to crust sufficiently so that carts could slide on by, converting frozen rivers into impromptu highways. You see yourself hunched over, rope digging into your shoulders, pulling a sled full of barrels along an infinite expanse of white, each gasp a breath of frozen vapor. The ropes creak, the ices groan beneath your feet, its very existence masquerading as commerce. Some versions suggest ingenuity that verges on farce. There is one odd Flemish town story about merchants sliding on inflated pigskins like improvised skates, shuffling along the ice in clumsy bounds. In another, wine barrels are rolled across solid rivers as sleds, villagers chuckling as they heave them along like gigantic toys. Amid the humor, however, lies desperation. Without trade, bellies will grow hollow and purses will run dry. You look down at the ice. It's not smooth, jagged cracks zigzag across its face, black lines where water still heaves below. You hear the low groan, something ancient sighing. With every step you take, it may hold or may splinter. Travelers have fallen through before, bodies lost beneath the white crust, muffled screams eaten by dark water. You walk gingerly, boots sliding, rope in your hands, and feel the world rock beneath you. Scholars debate even now whether these cyclical freezes harmed peasants or merchants more. Peasants were hardest hit, so some argue, and couldn't sell excess grain or purchase what they needed. Others think merchants suffered most, losing their fortunes as goods rotted in abandoned warehouses. Perhaps both happened. To you, walking across this landscape, the difference is irrelevant. Hunger and loss are equal when trade is interrupted. You walk past a riverside market, or at least what is left of it. Stalls are vacant, their awnings groaning under snow. A child kicks at icy mud where apples had rolled freely. The aroma of roasting fish and hot pies has given way to nothing, merely cold, vacant air. The quiet unsettles you. Town squares should be noisy, full of haggling, shouting, laughter. Now alone crows peck at rooftops, scavengers hoping for what bits of life are left. And yet humans adjust. Some villages stage fairs right on the frozen rivers as if to steal back what nature took. Merchants put out stalls on the ice, offering roasted chestnuts, woolen mittens, even hot wine warmed in cauldrons. Flags snap in the cold wind, kids run screaming after one another, and for one brief day the freeze is a carnival. You walk through one of these improvised carnivals, stomping your feet, inhaling the smoky aroma of grilling meat, amazed at the strength concealed in human obstinacy. You take a bite of a hot chestnut, scorching your tongue, and for an instant you forget the famine, the stillness, the peril. But the truth waits at the fringes. Outside the laughter, frozen barges remain empty. Guilds cry bitterly in town halls. Taxes are unpaid, nobles complain about lost revenues. And in each hut, peasants continue to tally dwindling stocks, wondering whether commerce will pick up before their pantries are bare. The fairs are momentary sparks of heat in a cold, lengthy winter, but sparks die away rapidly. You plod home with the falling dusk, the river a white expanse shining dimly in the fading light. The cold cuts deeper, so keen it seems to move of its own accord across your skin, cutting through cloak and boots as if they were nothing. Down under the ice, water continues to run, out of sight, unrelenting, reminding you that there is life beneath the ice, sequestered but waiting. You hold on to that. If rivers can flow under their imprisonment of ice, maybe you can too survive, slipping silently under winter's load until spring comes and at last shatters it open. And as you step from the ice back onto the snowy bank, you look back one final time at the frozen river. You notice the iced vessels, the drooping stalls, the thin lines of sledge tracks, a world suspended. But in that moment human beings endure. You pull your cloak closer, clench your jaw against the wind, and move forward. You push through drifts once more, but this time your route is not to the smoky lodge or the icy river, but towards the skeletal profile of a stone manor house. The comparison hits you straight away. On one side of the valley, peasants crouch in huts where smoke irritates the eyes and frost clings to rafters. On the other, lords feast in windy halls that, though chill by contemporary standards, still retain the semblance of abundance. Winter severs the world more ruthlessly than any wall. Within the manor's great hall, a fire burns in the central hearth, wood stacked so thick it crackles like thunder. The heat rises unevenly, burning for those nearest, cooling to cold at the periphery. Tapestries hang heavy on walls, not merely as decoration but to seal against drafts seeping between stone. The aroma is more full here. Roasted meats, spiced wine, beeswax candles. You breathe in, belly contorting at the idea of it. Historical accounts paint the riches of noble tables even in famine. Winter-salted venison, pork preserved from well-provisioned cellars, pies filled with currants and berries. But outside the walls, villagers survive on cabbage broth and bread made of acorns. The difference is obscene if you stand in both worlds in one breath. And then there are the quirky traditions reminding you privilege does not necessarily equate to comfort.